Hello and welcome to episode 71 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. This is Ben Olson in Washington, D.C., the lovely home of our political capital and
Jesus.
theatrics. So with me, as always, Nathan Fox. How's it going?
Good, man. I'm in Los Angeles. I've been traveling a ton. I was up in Petaluma. I was in Granite Bay. I was in Pacific Grove, Monterey. I just got back last night to Los Angeles. Mostly I've avoided watching. I did watch the first presidential debate, which was comedy, I thought.
Yeah, I didn't end up seeing it. There was a class going on, and around 9 or something, about 5 students left, I think, to go see it. They told me they just had to go see it. So
I thought Trump won. Can I tell you why?
Tell me why, yeah.
I mean, the pundits totally disagreed, and I don't know anything about politics, so, I'm sure they're right. And Hillary seems to get a bounce from it and everything, but
yeah.
Well, I just figured if you are an undecided voter at this point, you're probably a dumbass. And Trump's message plays very well to dumbasses because he just says his conclusions without any evidence at all. Right? Hillary tries to make rational arguments, and when you try to make a rational argument, like with evidence and a conclusion, then people can object. But Trump just says, "I'm going to fix everything," period.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I feel like if you're an idiot, that would be a really good, that sounds awesome. This guy's great.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I guess it's more complicated than that. That the pundits get to declare who wins, and then that actually influences the undecided voters. Because the undecided voters probably weren't even watching the debate.
Well, I think some of the points that the pundits were making, which goes to what I think you're saying, and that is that a lot of people make decisions not based on the rationale of the argument or whether it sounds legit or not, but how they feel about that person. And I think they were saying that by losing his cool in a lot of situations, that sent a message that was not ideal. And so a lot of people are making judgments just based on that. Like his facial expressions and things like that. The other thing, too, is if you just look at the amount of time that's spent talking on negative things, such as his taxes or I don't even remember. Like, he's made so many crazy claims, but just birtherism, stuff like that, Yeah. Like, the more time you spend talking about it, it doesn't matter who's, like if he wins that point or loses, the fact that you're talking about it just brings it up, and people leave with that sort of, idea, and you don't want them leaving with that idea. You want them leaving with a different idea,
I see.
And so I think you're exactly right. It's not about the soundness of the argument.
Yeah. I just can't wait for this to be over. It's so dumb.
It's pretty crazy. And it's surprising actually how poorly Hillary is doing going against someone like Trump. I think that just reveals how weak both candidates are. They both seem to have lots of problems from their past that are hard to get rid of.
Yeah, they're like the two most hated people in America. We're going to pick one of them to be our president. It's awesome.
It's a bummer that that's like the system, how the system works or whatever,
Yeah. Boy, why do we have to make it last so long?
I don't know. It's a rat race, don't you think? And everybody's just trying to go longer and longer and longer. It's kind of like, what is it?
Christmas decorations.
Christmas. Yeah,
right,
it's like sooner and sooner. Like, okay, come on. We haven't even had turkey yet. So.
Yeah. Well, it must be 10 times worse in D.C., I imagine.
Yeah, politics is a big topic here. A lot of people work on the Hill. A lot of people, even if they're not working on the Hill, they're working for contractors, government contractors. And it's part of everyday life. What is interesting to me is it's kind of normal now to talk about this stuff all the time. And so when I go somewhere else and there's some political scandal that's been all over the papers here or in Politico or whatever, these local news organizations, and I go somewhere else and I start talking about it, and people are like, "Yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about," and just being, "Oh, yeah, I guess that's it is really stupid," and everybody, no one else in the world cares about it. So
Well, it's like talking about the NFL to people that don't watch football.
yeah,
Like for people who watch the NFL, it's the most important thing in the world. And for people who are all into politics like that, it's basically just the NFL. I mean, that's how it seems to me. It's like NFL for like a different class of people
yeah,
that you're just like rooting for, the red team or the blue team.
hmm,
And it's not really that big of a, I don't know, from the outside, it's like, who gives a shit which which team, the red team or the blue team, wins? I mean, I know it's allegedly makes all these big changes in the world, but
who knows?
I always think about, well, according to half of the nation, we have lived through the worst president ever, like 5 times in my lifetime.
Hmm,
Right?
hmm,
I mean,
yeah,
there's people who are convinced that George W. Bush was the worst president ever, and then the rest of the country believes that Obama's the worst president ever.
yeah,
So, okay, great. And meanwhile, I don't know, my life just keeps getting better and better. Things just seem to be getting nicer and better and safer and cleaner, and we're all getting richer. Like, okay, I don't know how bad these people really could possibly be.
yeah. It's crazy. I'm just surprised. I mean, revealing my political stripes too much here, maybe, but I'm just surprised how many people support Trump. And you'd always expect there to be some segment of the population, but I don't know. He still has a large sum of people, and a lot of those people are educated. I don't get it. I mean, he's kind of crazy.
They're not educated. You got to come to my hometown. I mean, I see
Oh, I think a
Trump.
lot of people aren't, but I think I'm surprised in this area who is behind Trump and says things like, "Well, he didn't really mean that." I think it's kind of like Pence in this debate that I guess happened last night, saying a lot of times that "Oh, Trump didn't exactly say that," and it's like, yeah, he did, and he said it
Yeah,
that badly. He
that's
yes, he did make fun
exactly
of a
what he
reporter.
said.
Yes. He said that people who have PTSD are weak. It's just, it's insane. I just don't understand how, like, this isn't, I mean, it pretty much already is over, but it's surprising to me there's still that many people supporting him.
Yeah, well, seems like one way or the other, we're going to be done with it in another month, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. God.
Something like, yeah, a month. Today's the 5th, so we have another month and it'll be over.
Well, hopefully we'll get some more good laughs out of it. I mean, if I watched the first debate with some friends, my buddy Mike and his mom, and it was pretty hilarious to just have a couple of cocktails and sit there and yell at the TV for a little while. So kind of fun.
Yeah, good interaction.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, today we have a lot of stuff to talk about in terms of the September LSAT that just happened. Some interesting stories. Then an update on whether or not the LSAT is going to become a digital test or not. And then, of course, questions from you all our listeners. Thank you very much, and we'll dive into those.
So I wanted to make a little plug for a couple of weekend classes that I just recently posted to my website.
Sure.
If you just bear with me for 1 second, it's
Yeah.
Saturday, October 22nd, and Sunday, October 23rd. I'm doing
Hmm.
an LSAT boot camp in Los Angeles. It's
Mm.
actually in Glendale, but it's a boot camp from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday the 22nd and Sunday the 23rd of October. That's in Los Angeles, and I will be doing among other things, I'm going to be doing Prep Test 79, which is the September 2016 LSAT. Whether you're just starting off with your LSAT prep or you actually took the September 2016 test, I think
Hmm.
that class will be a worthwhile use of your time. If you're restudying, re-preparing for a retake in December, you absolutely need to start by reviewing that test that you just bombed, December or the September 2016 test. So
Yeah.
there's that class, and then there's one more boot camp. I'm actually doing the same thing, but in San Francisco, and that is on October 29th and 30th. Same thing, 10 to 5 on Saturday and Sunday, the 29th and 30th in San Francisco, and the 22nd and 23rd in Los Angeles. Okay, that's the end of my commercial.
No, that's great. Thanks for the commercial break. Do you bill these as LSAT classes or weekends with Nathan Fox?
It's a special weekend with Nathan Fox. I encourage people to come from out of town and make a big vacation of it,
Yeah.
and hang out and do the weekend class. But no, they are really fun. People do actually. It's kind of crazy. People come from all over the place. Like they'll come from Las Vegas and stay in town for the
And they
weekend.
do like an Airbnb or something?
Stay in a hotel downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, those are on my website if anybody wants to sign up.
Should we jump into the September test?
Yeah, I think we could talk about the September test.
Okay, well, I do have a couple of stories that I don't know if they're relevant at all, but they did surprise me a little bit. I had one student who got a test violation for going a second over on the writing portion.
Wow.
So they said stop. He like finished the word and put his pencil down, and they're like, "Come here." And he thought there was some confusion about something or whatever. And then they're like, "Oh, we're giving you a violation
Ouch.
going over on the writing sample." And he was a little nervous about that and what that meant. And I'm
Hmm.
not exactly sure how they indicate a violation on your score report. I think they put like a V, but I don't know if they elaborate on that. Do you know?
I do not know. Maybe a listener will email us and we can give an update on the next show. I always thought that it was like a canceled score and some sort of a notation on your record. Do you know if they're going to cancel his score or if he's going to get his score?
No, I don't know that. And he didn't know either, although I think he was under the impression that he would keep his score. I'm I'm assuming that he would. It feels like there's got to be a range of violations,
Well, the
right?
writing sample has nothing to do with your 120 to 180 LSAT score, so why would it matter, right? I mean, his score is still his score,
Yeah.
but he went over on the writing sample. Also, dude, why are you going over on the writing sample?
Well, that's the thing, and I think he was saying that it wasn't really
Bullshit.
going over. It was like a second. It
Bullshit.
was
I don't care. Bullshit. Just, come on. What are you doing? The writing sample is so easy and it doesn't matter. You don't need to there's no such, you don't really need to finish it or anything, right? I mean, when the proctor says 5 minutes, you say, for the above reasons, the Rodriguezes should send Anya to school A, period.
Yeah, I agree. So you're saying at the 5 minute time, just end it.
At the 5 minute warning, you just end it and then you
Yeah.
reread it and edit it and all that stuff. So what's he frantically writing at the, I don't know, that to me indicates like bad overall test mojo, like just not quite, being so hectic and so frantic about the writing sample that you're going to be writing all the way through the end of the 35 minutes. I mean, even if it is only 1 second, I'm not saying he lied. I'm just
Yeah.
saying if it's 1 second, that's about 3 minutes too much.
Yeah, you should be you get the 5 minute warning, wrap up your idea, your sentence so that it ends on a good note and then be done.
Yeah, you finish the sentence you're writing, and then you say, it's super formulaic, right? I mean, I would think the last sentence of everyone's writing sample could basically be, for the above reasons, they should do this,
Yeah,
period.
if you even need to say that. I mean, I tell people to write the first sentence as their main point, like they should do this or they should do that. And so your main idea has already been,
Yeah, well,
clearly stated.
I say clear, yeah, clearly stated in the first sentence and clearly stated in the last sentence, just
Hmm.
because, like, hey, I'm following the directions, and this is my. It's just a one sentence wrap up conclusion. I mean, yeah, I guess you
Yeah,
don't really necessarily need it, but it's a nice way to just tie it up for people who feel like, oh, I have to have some sort of a conclusion.
sure.
For the above reasons, this is what they should do. Boom.
Yep.
And then that's it. And then you should be editing and rereading and making sure that the spelling is okay and that your handwriting is legible or whatever.
Hmm.
But you shouldn't be frantically trying to finish up that essay at the end of you just you don't need to say all the things. You just need to make a bunch of points and then wrap it up. That's it.
Yeah, I think looking forward in his case, and if this ever happens to anyone, I would consider the seriousness of the violation. And I mean, he's going to have to write an addendum, but I can't imagine this being that serious to law schools. So I think it's normal to freak out in these situations, but I mean, any reasonable admissions reviewer, how seriously are they going to take a 1 second over, a few seconds over, whatever it was on the writing sample? I would just,
Unfortunately, he if he writes an addendum that comes off at all like confrontational or this isn't fair or whatever,
Mhm.
then I feel like he's gonna flag himself as like a problem student maybe.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. You have to strike the right tone. You have to strike the tone that you screwed up. But at
Yeah,
the same time, I think you do need to get that message there so that they know exactly what the violation was for. I'm assuming LSAC will tell them in some way because there are so many different kinds of violations. But you'd want to write that addendum and make it clear what happened so that no one misses that
yeah.
point, right?
Well, let's make sure to get an update on this when the scores are out. By the time we record the next episode, scores will be out, and we should be able to find out from him what his score report looks like, right? And
Yeah.
if that violation's on there, and it better specifically flag it that it was a violation on the writing sample and not a violation on the 120 to 180 score.
Hmm.
But no, I mean, I think you got to take those those things pretty seriously,
Yeah.
right? Like the rules are the rules, and when they say time's up, you should be putting your pencil down.
Hmm.
I mean, I had the student who got busted for darkening in her bubbles after time had been called. I've probably told that story a million times on the show. But, it's just, why are you so frantic? What are you doing? Why 35 minutes should be enough.
Yeah.
That's how much time you get. You don't get more than 35 minutes. Anyway, sorry to bust your students' balls there, but
Oh no, I mean I think you make a good point about ending the writing sample. You should be ending it early. So
yeah.
I think it's a fair point. In terms of, I have another good story actually about proctors before we go on. There was one student who was in a room and the proctor called time at 3 minutes, and it's like okay, not ideal, obviously, but they told them that they had 3 minutes, and everybody kind of looked up and was like, okay. And they finished that section. And in the next section, I guess the proctors, out of fear of making a mistake again, jumped the gun and at 10 minutes told them that they had five.
Wait, I've heard this twice now. This happened last time as well. This happened on the June test.
Oh, really? I don't remember that from the June test.
Well, so I had a student on the June test. I think this was in Chicago. That the proctors called 5 minutes when there was actually 10 minutes left.
Mm,
Everyone in the
mm,
room freaked out and said, "No, no, there's 10 minutes left." And the proctor said, "Oh, oh, I'm sorry." Then the proctor proceeded to not give them a 5 minute warning
mm-hmm.
in that same section and just call times up. And then everyone freaked out. Hey, wait a minute! You're supposed to give us a 5 minute warning.
Yeah.
And then that proctor decided, oh, okay, well, I'm going to give everybody 2 more minutes so that you can wrap up. That happened on the June
That'd be
test.
glorious.
Yeah, my student who was there was like, sweet, and he got like answered another question or two.
Yeah.
So this is again a proctor jumping the gun and saying 5 minutes when there's actually 10 left. I assume everyone in the room freaks out when that happens, right?
Yeah.
And says,
Well,
no, no, no.
no one said anything apparently. So there was this sort of collective. I mean, this is all group psychology. I don't know,
Yeah,
but in
right.
this particular case, they didn't. Everyone looked up. Like there was, I think there was like skepticism, but no one said anything. And
Wow.
so my student thought that she didn't, she didn't know. I guess she didn't have a watch or something. So I think if I remember correctly, but she was like, well, maybe this is the 5 minute thing. So she thought, wow, I have a lot more to do than I normally do at 5 minutes. So unfortunately, she rushed. In which
Ugh.
case you shouldn't, right? But I think it was kind of a panic too because this is not normally where she'd be at in 5 minutes. And then at the actual 5 minutes, the other proctor said 5 minutes. And at that point, everybody was like, "What?" And so they had 5 more minutes, and then it was over. But those last 10 minutes for most people in the room, at least from her perspective, were sort of a slate of confusion and
Wow. Wow.
rushed questions. So anyway, something to watch out for, and it's one reason to consider bringing a watch. I know you're a big opponent of that, but I think that I prefer to have a watch because I like to keep track of my time. I think that if a watch messes you up because you keep looking at it, you still shouldn't bring it. But if you're on the fence with that, it's not something that's a distraction. I would say, hey, take control of the time, and then you know what's going on.
Yeah, I guess that seems like a crazily passive group of LSAT students, right? I mean, I would assume, man, if I ever did that, my kids would yell at me. They would bite my head off if I was like, if I said 5 minutes when there was actually 10 minutes left. I feel like my students would be like, no, because they're,
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know. That's what
even though I'm
happens.
always yelling at them about not bringing a watch, they still have their watch. They're still doing it. Like they can't. They're type A, you know. They can't
Yeah,
not do it. So they would still. Boy, I'm amazed that a whole room at the actual LSAT and a whole room of people didn't say no. There's actually 10 minutes left. I'm sure some people had to know that. That's
yeah,
weird. Huh.
yeah. I don't know. Yeah, well, maybe the ones who knew were just like, whatever,
Yeah, it doesn't
Let me
really
just keep
matter.
going and
Exactly right. Yeah.
ignore it.
I'm in the zone. I'm working on this question. Like, who cares how much time's left? I'm working on this question. That's actually how you should really be feeling, right? You should be, ideally, you should be like, the proctors can say whatever they want. I'm
Mhm.
just going to work on this question right here and get it right. That's what I'm
Yeah,
doing.
yeah. Last one was a student had the proctor come sit next to them and start reading a magazine, a fashion magazine, to be precise.
That that is awesome. Yeah, we've heard some recent like comedy from the test proctors. Um, proctors having a conversation in the front of the room.
Oh, yeah,
Even like whispering, which is almost more annoying than just talking
yeah,
out loud.
yeah.
But whispered conversation. And this one, yeah, boy, sitting right next to the student and paging through a magazine. Wow. Wow.
We've talked about proctors who have talked on the phone,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So apparently, have you heard about these studies? That's like way worse than hearing a conversation because when you only hear half, your mind desperately tries to,
Fill in the other side.
yeah, gain coherence and understanding. And so it takes a lot more mental effort and distracts people more. It's tough. It's stuff you have to
Wow.
kind of just force yourself to ignore and
I've said it
focus.
before on the show, but LSAT proctors, you need to get your shit together.
No kidding. I think they just don't care. A lot of them don't even know what the heck is going on, you
No.
know?
Well, I
That's
mean,
why they're proctoring,
think of
unfortunately.
think about that job, right? I mean, they get paid 4 days a year to sit there and run a stopwatch for 3 hours.
Hmm.
I mean, it's not exactly a high powered kind of a job, right? It's nobody's full time job. So it's just a bunch of whatever campus employees trying to pick up a little extra cash on the side and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
Is the people that are doing the proctoring. But still, it seems like they should have pretty strict instructions. As crazy as the LSAC is with all of their strict instructions that they give the students, it seems like they could give the proctors some very basic instructions, like
Yeah.
stop annoying the students in the room.
Yeah.
It's about them, not about you. So don't be on the phone and having a conversation and reading a fashion magazine and fucking up the time. You had one job, which was to run the time, and not like you're supposed to keep the room quiet. And okay, two jobs: keep the room quiet and run the stopwatch.
You know what they should do is they should freaking automate this. They should just give all their proctors a stupid little app that they push play
Yeah,
and it says like turn to section 1
yeah.
and then
Well,
does it all
soon
for them.
it'll be like auto drive car. There won't even be a proctor. They'll just be like proctor bot.
I feel like you still need a proctor, right? To like enforce the rules. Someone watching, walking around.
I'm thinking like the Terminator.
Oh, yeah. Totally worth it. We've got Yeah, that would be cool. Well, I mean, it just doesn't seem that hard to create an app that would just do everything for them, you know?
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
then they
Yeah.
could pause it and have a red button, emergency situation.
Agreed. Well, hey, that segues into one of our topics that we were going to talk about, right?
Oh, it does? I don't, which one? The digital LSAT or
Yeah, yeah, because
yeah.
that's all going to be. It is going to be obviated if they go to the digital LSAT, right?
Oh, there's an LSAT word, or there's a law school word for you.
Obviated, folks. It
Yeah.
means made redundant or made unnecessary.
Yeah. I remember in law school debating whether obviate the need was a redundant sentence or phrase.
Obviate the need for, or something like that. And
Yeah.
just say,
Yeah.
instead, just say obviate. I would prefer just obviate.
Yeah. Anyway, so the digital LSAT, let me actually read this from LSAC. So this is the December 2004 LSAT newsletter. This is LSAC report, newsletter of the Law School Admission Council, which I had no idea existed, but it's still entertaining to read this. It says digital LSAT. This is a random side note in the margin on page 5 of the December 2014 report, which is
Okay.
right next to an update, by the way, on LSAT India. In any case, it says LSAC is conducting research involving LSAT delivery options for the future. We are studying the feasibility of a tablet based LSAT administration system, which will likely be field tested sometime in 2015. Didn't happen, right?
As far as
I
we
never heard
know,
of it. Yeah. No decision has been made regarding future implementation of such a system. In the 1990s, LSAC began researching the potential for electronic delivery of the test. Why can't they just talk normal? And this is a continuation of those efforts. So they've been looking into this for the past 2.5 decades, and no progress as of yet. But, they really need to do this. The test would be shorter if they did this
correct.
because they wouldn't have to throw every question at you. They could just see your difficulty level. It would be adaptive, right? It would figure out what your skill is and then zero in on that difficulty level and figure out exactly how good you are or not good you are at these kinds of questions.
Yeah, the GRE and the GMAT both already do this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's awesome. You go sit in front of a computer screen. The GRE and the GMAT, you can both go to just random like testing centers. When I took the GMAT, I think it was, yeah, I like scheduled myself an appointment at a time and place that was convenient for me. And I rolled in and I sat down in front of a computer screen, and it like the proctor guy or whoever was there running the facility
Yeah.
loads up the like, oh, you're here to take the, what is it, GMAT? Oh, okay, yeah, and puts the GMAT program, and it comes through the computer screen, and
Mm-hmm.
you just start doing questions, and yeah, it starts you with an average difficulty question, and if you get it right, then you get a point, and it gives you a slightly harder question.
Mm-hmm.
If you get it wrong, then you don't get a point, and it asks you a slightly lower difficulty question.
Yep.
And in that way, they can ask you far less questions because if you start getting them all right, then you quickly get into the hardest questions. And if you get the hardest questions right, then they're like, oh, you know what you're doing, and they give you a good score.
Yep.
And if you miss the average one, and then you miss an easier one, and then you miss another easier one, then they quickly narrow in on, well, you suck at this, and then you get a lower score.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to say that, yeah, the GMAT was maybe like something like 75-minute. No, no, it had to be less than that. Anyway, it was nothing, and it certainly wasn't like this big stressful thing of an hour for registration and all the complicated instructions and the passing out of the papers and the recollecting of the papers and all that stuff just didn't even have to happen. Oh, and by the way, at the very end, it was like, would you like to see your score? Yes or no? And you click yes, and it's like immediately, bang, there's your score.
Yeah. I think it's funny that they're talking about the quote feasibility of a tablet-based LSAT administration. It sounds to me like they're still imagining this as a test in which everyone goes to a place, they're given a tablet, and then they take the test, as opposed to piggybacking off of the centers that have already been set up for the GMAT and the
Well,
GRE. And that's what they should do.
sure, except if you had a billion-dollar business administering tests,
Yeah.
right? Then you might decide, and a monopoly,
Yeah.
then why would you just give that all? I mean, you could still charge whatever you wanted for the test, I suppose, but
Yeah. I don't know. It seems like you could get more people in taking it because they could take it. You could say take it every 4 weeks or something, and I don't know. What's the GMAT?
the GRE and the GMAT are like continuously just you can take it whenever you want. I mean, I don't think you can take it 2 days in a row, but you can take it any day that those testing centers are open, which is like every day. You can just sign up. Like you make an appointment for yourself a week or 10 days in advance. It'd be so much easier for students to prepare for because they could just get, they do a bunch of obviously still do a bunch of practice to
Yep.
just get good at the test, but then once you're ready, then you could sign up for the test.
Yeah.
The way the LSAC does it, you have to sign up a month in advance or more, and it's only offered 4 times a year. So you have to like make a plan in advance for when you're going to take the test.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, I mean, it's so much more civilized for the GRE and the GMAT, I think.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking. Is like you could take it at any time, and so it seems like people would take it more. Maybe. I don't know.
But maybe they wouldn't be able to charge so much for it or something, or I don't know. Yeah. Maybe they're
Yeah.
just a bunch of lawyers and lawyers don't do anything quickly.
I think that's got to be a big part of this.
I mean, they get sued right and left, right?
Yeah. If they started thinking about this in the 90s and we're still talking about it.
Maybe it's actually the student's fault because they're all such litigious people, right? These are all people who are going to go to law school.
Hmm.
So there is quite a bit of like entitlement and just, I'm going to stand up for my rights. So people end up suing the LSAC all the time. So then the LSAC ends up having to be like defense mode anytime they want to make any changes to the test.
Hmm. Hmm.
That could be part of it.
Anyway, I hope it does happen. I think it would be cool for the test to change I mean, it's got to happen at some point. I feel like it's what, 2020? We're going to still be doing this on paper?
Sure seems inevitable. I mean, but if we had to bet whether it's going to happen before 2020, I don't know about that.
I don't know about that either.
What have they done? The changes that they've made to the test in 2007, they added the comparative reading.
Hmm.
That was 10 years ago now, almost 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the test just doesn't change. So, yeah, hopefully they'll do it. I think it'll make everybody's life easier.
Yeah. Hey, so one thing about the test, a couple other things to talk about is first, accommodated students. Did we
Mm,
find out whether they had the experimental section or not?
they did.
You, they did. You know if any double time students had the experimental section?
Um, I no, I heard from one um, unhappy accommodated student who sat down at the test and there were 5 sections and she she said she did the way it went down because she wasn't expecting it. The way it went down was she didn't she thought that the proctor had made an error because the proctor didn't know which of the 5 sections was experimental.
Yeah.
And because, yeah, one of them was experimental, but no, the proctor wasn't supposed to know because accommodated students, as far as I know, accommodated students now have to take the experimental section. But I think that she was only a time and a half student.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, she, like, I think melted down on the whole test because of that, because it
Hmm.
was just so confusing and she couldn't wrap her mind around it. I mean, the truth is it's only an additional 47 and a half minutes or what, no, not 47 and a half, 53
53.
and a half or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, 53 and a half minutes.
Oh, they just give you 53, but yeah.
Oh, 53. Okay.
Hmm.
Well, that's not time and a half. Is that more than time and a half?
I think it is. Let's see here. So 35 times. Yeah, it's 52.5. And so they're giving you 53. They're giving you 30 extra
Give you
seconds.
extra 30 seconds. Ah, you're already getting
Woo!
extra time. You might as well just get more extra time. Yeah, so it's too bad. I mean, I feel bad for her that, but she freaked out, I guess, and it sort of she couldn't get it out of her head, so she like choked, I think, on the rest of the test. One of many ways that people choke on the test.
Yeah. So I had a double time student who gave me an email. I should just follow up with him, but he gave me an email right before the test, and that's the one we had exchanged emails about, which said, I mean, it was very cryptic and legal defensive
Right.
writing,
Hmm.
but it basically said all students, and I took that from logical reasoning to mean every single one, including accommodated students, would now be doing the quote variable section. That's what they call it. So maybe even double time students are doing 5 sections.
I have to say, I mean, I know you said you think that's ridiculous or whatever, but I can't get my head around the idea that accommodated students should be doing less work on the day of the test. It just and not also not having the mental game of, hey, I had two game sections, which one was experimental.
Hmm.
I don't think it's fair that accommodated students didn't have that. I just I can't I don't think I'm ever going to wrap my head around the idea of accommodated students getting to do less reading on the
Yeah.
day of the test.
Yeah.
How's that fair, man? That can't possibly be fair. So, and I know what you mean that, oh shit, well, that's going to be a very long day now for the accommodated students.
Yeah. Well, the test alone would take about just shy of 6 hours plus a break plus
Yeah, well,
instructions.
you know what? There's an easy solution to that. Don't get accommodations and just take it the way everybody else takes it. You know, like
Yeah, but then we
what do
get
you
back into the
want?
whole issue of like, are these legit or not, right? And
Do you
in
just
some
want
cases,
free
they're not.
points or what the fuck do you want? I don't know. I'm it just I know that some students have legitimate need for accommodations, but there are, it seems to me, students who just aren't happy with their score, want a higher score, going to get accommodations for it.
Mm.
And I am I'm fully on board. And maybe they should have made a bigger announcement of it, though, right? Like it should.
Well, at least not such a cryptic one. And this is after that guy got that email after he asked them explicitly, would he have an experimental section? And they wrote back this like, essay instead of just saying yes. Yeah, it's weird. I don't understand. I think they took the position we never told anyone they wouldn't have an experimental section. So the fact that they've never got it in the past and might learn from previous students.
What a bunch of dicks! Oh my god. That is just the worst. That's the worst aspect of lawyers. You know,
Yeah.
like I'm not obligated to give you a straight answer, so I'm not going to.
What I literally said is true.
What I said was defensible, legally defensible.
Yeah.
Come on. Okay, well, it seems like accommodated students, you need to expect that you're going to have to do the same amount of work as everyone else on the day of the test now. And it went along with the fact that there's no asterisk on the score report anymore, right? It used to say before the lawsuit, it used to say, "Hey, the student got accommodations," and
Yeah.
now they've lost that lawsuit, and so there is no asterisk on the score report anymore. But now the LSAC is like, "Oh, well, good, you're going to have to do the experimental section at least then."
Yeah.
Um, I imagine the LSAC must hate the accommodations thing, right? They got sued and lost and had to change all their shit, and they must hate it.
I think well, they have to accommodate more people now and they have to make accommodations. I can't think of a better word than, which means they have to make adjustments. They can't put everybody in the same box. They got to get all these rooms. I've heard about accommodations, and if you can get them, go get them. I'm not saying not to get them, but accommodations where people are taking the test over 2 days instead of one. There's all sorts of things that now the LSAC has to account for. It'd be so much easier if everyone was doing the same thing. So I'm sure it's a hassle. It's an administrative hassle.
I can't wait till everybody starts bringing their service animals with them. I mean, that probably already people are
Oh, they
allowed
do. I'm
probably to
sure.
do. And by the way, I have known people. I had a girl in my class one time who had she had some trauma in her life previously, and she had a little tiny little dog that like went around everywhere with her in her purse,
Yeah.
and the dog never made a peep, and it was like totally perfectly fine. And I am not like mocking people who have legitimate needs for a service animal. I just am talking about all the people who take like their pets with them on the planes now, just right and left because it's so easy to get that like service animal notification.
Mm-hmm.
People
Yeah.
taking service pigs on the plane and stuff.
Is this like people who try to get medical marijuana for
Exactly. It's exactly like medical marijuana, which is also really, really stupid. I mean, I'm not saying don't go get your medical marijuana card. I'm just saying it's not like really a legit. It's just, it's, come on, it's silly.
Yes. The rules are what they are, and you should take advantage of them if you can.
Shit,
Although
yeah.
that doesn't mean the rules don't suck.
Exactly, exactly. Yep. In basketball, there's five foul. You get to have five fouls in a game. You get to commit fouls in basketball.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, if you don't commit those fouls, if you finish the game and you never get a foul called on you, then you're not doing it right. You're supposed to bend the rules and
Yeah.
get called for fouls sometimes.
No, wait. What's the penalty for when you get? This just reveals my ignorance about basketball. But in some cases, you can shoot free throws, right? In other cases, you get
Yeah, it's
the
like
ball transferred.
it's an escalating series. Like depends on the context, right? If some
Okay.
but there are times when a foul is absolutely 100% appropriate. Like some guy is driving for a layup and he's gonna score 2 points,
You
but
might as
you
well take the
can
chance.
you can hack him. Well, you can even know you're gonna get called for a foul, right? But you
Yeah. Yeah.
hack him. It's one of your five fouls, and now he has to go shoot two free throws, which he might miss.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that case, if you don't foul him, like what are you doing? You have to foul him.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey, if you got accommodations on the SAT, you might as well just go right ahead and get accommodations on the LSAT as well. Your
Mhm.
competitors will if you don't, so go do it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that the system makes any sense. I mean, it's a very hard issue.
Yeah. So last thing about the September LSAT, a lot of people complained about the fourth game,
Oh yeah,
the virus game. I haven't seen the game yet, of course, although I don't feel like this is very surprising. It seems like over the last 10 tests, LSAC has made efforts to create some sort of game that hasn't been seen before. And so it sounds like they did it again.
yeah, and I don't think anybody did well on it. From what I've heard, even my top students, it seems like they kind of ran out of gas halfway through the fourth game.
Hmm.
I heard maybe one or two students who felt like they finished, but I think everybody reported that the fourth game was just kind of weird.
Mm.
There have been a lot of weird games recently, though. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that should be anybody any kind of a surprise.
Yeah.
I got a couple of the usual. Oh well, when I saw that section, I was just sure that it had to be the experimental section because it was so weird. You
Hmm.
get you get that from people, right? Which is like, dude, you haven't done enough prep apparently because they put weird games sometimes.
Well, not only that, but even if it is weird, I mean, the weird thing's got to start sometime. Why are you thinking it's not your test?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But I mean, and just if you've done all of the tests from like, let's say you've done prep test, all the games from like 60 through 78,
Yeah.
which would be, pretty much necessary, I would think, to be
Hmm.
adequately prepared for the test. You should
Yeah.
do all of the most recent 10 or 20 tests worth of games at least.
Hmm.
And if you've done those 10 or 20 tests worth of games, then it's very obvious that they put weird curveballs in there. I mean,
Hmm.
you're gonna have encountered a bunch of weird stuff. So why are you like can't believe it when it happens on the day of your actual test? I don't know.
Yeah. That'll be interesting. I'm excited to see that game now. See how hard it really is. I'm
Yeah,
sure it's hard, but
I am not sure that it's that hard. I mean, there again, 100% of the information is on the page, right? It's all right there for you.
yep.
You just have to unlock that system and see the way the rules combine with one another. And no, I mean, I feel like some of the curveballs, some of the curveballs are actually some of the easiest games. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise. It's game four, so we could presume that it's probably the hardest one. Um, but it doesn't necessarily have to be hard just because it's strange, right?
Yeah.
It's possible that it was just like, oh, once you see kind of how it works, then it's just a lot simpler than you might have thought. Look, for example, you remember the game about the people choosing offices, right?
Yeah.
That's a very recent game where there were four people choosing offices, and people
Hmm.
thought that game was impossible.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, that system is actually really pretty easy to understand.
I think one of the challenges with that game, speaking of it, is the fact that you don't really create a diagram. At least I don't.
Correct. No, no, not any. I made no diagram at all last time I taught that game, and so yeah, that's weird. That's a curveball for sure.
Yeah, and I think they feel like they must or they're missing something, and that wasn't true with that game. And I don't feel I actually ended up creating a small diagram. Do you remember that one about the?
The work pieces.
There's the work pieces.
That one I didn't do any diagram.
I did create a shell for that. I also created somewhat of a structure, but ended up not using it for the one that's about the news pieces in the slots. Do you know what I'm talking
Oh,
about?
interesting. Wait.
The features. You had to have like
Yeah, right.
features and
Hmm.
there's things like that. But it's like you kind of write out the five slots and then that's it. You're like, okay. Everything else is just
Right.
sort of in your head. And I guess just being aware that that may be the kind of game you're looking at. And maybe, who knows, for viruses, maybe there's something to draw for viruses. I'm not saying anything about that. But if you're aware of the fact that it is completely legitimate to do some games, not very many, but some without much of a drawing, then you can have the confidence to plow ahead and start getting your mind wrapped around it without just panicking and saying, well, I don't have anything written down, so I must not know what's going on.
I can't wait for it.
Yeah. So we have an email from Greg,
Cool.
and Greg just took the September LSAT, which we've been talking about so fondly. And as he says, my pre-law advisor told me that the consensus is that the most recent test, the September test, was quote unusual. Have you guys heard this as well? What could it mean for the future of the LSAT? I'm planning to take the December test, which is the next one, and I don't want to be caught off guard. Wait, so did he end up taking this?
No, he says he postponed it.
Oh, he postponed it. Yeah, okay. I saw that and I was
So he's just
got it.
worried because his questionable pre-law advisor. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, really, the consensus is that it was unusual? I don't think so. Consensus
Well,
according to
what does
whom?
that even mean? I mean, yeah, the fourth game was probably new and maybe uncharted territory, but that itself is not unusual. That's usual. In fact, it's probably a little surprising when all the games are nice and everybody's
Yeah,
like, "Oh,
right.
wow, I had a nice game sections and things went well." I think that's what happened in the June 2016 LSAT, which made it a slightly easier test, I feel
And
like.
yeah, and then once again, by the way, people, you need to not just have one test date on your calendar. You got to be thinking about having a backup plan and potentially two backup dates because yeah, June 2016 games, if that was the test, I can't remember which one's which, but June 2016 could have been really easy and September 2016 could have been really weird. And
Yeah.
December 2016, we don't know. And but I am pretty certain that if you take three tests in a row, one of them is going to be a pretty manageable section of games. That seems to be how it goes, right?
Yeah.
So, for these people who just have the idea that they're only going to ever take the LSAT once, I feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Hmm. This actually goes. So, bottom line is, I don't think the test has changed. In fact, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. If anything, the test is changing at a snail's pace and will remain functionally the same for the foreseeable future.
But that means that it's unpredictable from test to test to test, right? I mean, the tests, the games especially, do change in difficulty, but that's a constant. It's a constant that they change.
Yeah, it's a constant they change, but even that change we're not talking about is very significant, right? I mean, it's still going to be a game that you can figure out if you think about it and so on.
Yeah, and I'm sure games 1 through 3 weren't hard or
They
weren't.
were the same ordering, grouping, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So, Greg, don't fear, embrace change, the little that there is on the LSAT.
Yeah, no.
Celebrate the little bit that changes from test to test. And maybe you take it in December and things go well and you call it a day. or they don't, and you take it in February and you apply maybe for the next cycle.
Yep, perfect.
So this goes into the next question, because in the next question, this email is from, who knows, anonymous for now, and somewhere in here, it's he asked about the consistency. He says, finally, we can go back to his other question, but right now he says, finally, any thoughts on consistency? I can never seem to put in my best performance on all four sections at the same time. It sometimes feels like I'm playing whack-a-mole when I'm trying to shore up my weak areas and score. This is super common, by the way. Almost everyone experiences this. They do poorly on reading comp or whatever, and then they maybe even focus on it that week, and the next week they do better in reading comp, but then all of a sudden their LR scores drop a little bit or their game scores drop from what it was before. And they feel like, I think that it has something to do with them. And although it certainly could, I think it has a lot more to do with the fact that the tests changes, not significantly, but the difficulty of each section varies a little bit from test to test. I think the overall test is going to be the same difficulty, but the game's maybe a little bit easier, but then the overall test is the same because the LR picks up and makes it a little harder.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The test itself does change. Also, I don't think really people ever get consistent. I don't think there's really such a thing as consistency on the LSAT until you start scoring 175s all the time.
Yeah, that's true. There's this idea of what does constitute consistency, right? Like if someone's score dropped 10 points, I'd be like, well, what happened? But if they get -2 in logical reasoning one week and then they get -5 the next week, they're like, oh, this week was so much worse than last time. And I'm thinking, 3 questions. I don't know. It doesn't seem that much different. It's very possible that some things played in your favor before and they played against you now, but this is all like where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, this student is defining consistency as I want my best performance on all four sections at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's not consistency. I mean, look at your logical reasoning average of the last 10 tests or whatever,
Hmm.
and that average score is what you would get, if you were consistent. I don't know. Like, oh, if I just do the best I can, if I just get minus, I got one test I got -2 on the logical reasoning, and another test I got perfect on the games, and another test I got -3 on the reading comprehension. And if I put all those together at once, I get a 175. Well, I know, but that's just like picking out all of your best performances and saying, I want all of that, and then I'm going to be consistent. I don't
Yeah.
know. That's a weird definition, I think, of consistency.
Yes. No, it's an excellent point. It's like you have a bell curve and this person is basically choosing the top end of that bell curve every time, whereas in reality you should be picking the top of the curve as opposed to
Yeah.
the unusual stuff or the unlikely scenarios.
In my experience, when people are complaining about inconsistent scores, it's almost always just, hey, you're not good enough at the test yet. And, people, I get there's a weird thing where students think they're better at the test than they actually are, right? Like they do a section of logical reasoning and they attempt 23 questions and they get 20 right. And I'm like, oh wow, great job, that's awesome, cool.
Hmm.
And then they're like, yep, I've got logical reasoning nailed down now, and they just think they own it.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, let's look at your last test or the test before that, and let's look at the next test and let's see how good you really are at logical reasoning. It's not enough to just do it once and then say, okay, I'm awesome at logical reasoning now.
Hmm.
Because I'll have students who are just be like, oh, well, I got that section nailed down. I'm just going to work on these other sections.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they go back and they say, oh, I stopped working on logical reasoning for a little while, and then on the next section I missed 8. And it's like, I don't even think it has anything to do with the fact that you weren't working on logical reasoning. I think it
Hmm.
has to do with you just weren't that good at logical reasoning to begin with.
Yeah.
So, for consistency, I would just say, yeah, keep practicing, keep grinding it out.
Yeah. One thing to add to what you're saying there, that book that I've been reading, Make It Stick,
Uh-huh.
it's all about studies on learning and so forth. And one thing that is interesting is not only what you're saying, that people tend to think that they know more than they do. But that trend, and this isn't going to be surprising in hindsight, but that trend is worse for people who know less. So the more poorly you perform on the test, the more likely it is that you think you understand it, which is, a little bit of a paradox because your score is saying that you're not doing that well. But in these studies where they're asking people how well did they do and how well did they feel they did, and the worse they did, the better they felt about their
Hey,
score.
Donald Trump, how'd you do in the debate? Awesome. I did great.
Huge.
Huge win. Huge win. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this happens in class too. I mean, I think we've talked about this where we're working with people in one-on-one tutoring or in class or whatever, and some people who are scoring in the mid 170s are coming in and they're saying things like, "Okay, I got the correct answer. I chose D. I think that B is wrong for this reason, but I still feel like it could be right for this other reason. What's your thought on this?" And we're having a discussion about a question that they got right.
Yeah.
And maybe it's a 5-minute discussion, 10-minute discussion, and then I'll be talking with someone else, and they got 12 questions wrong in that section, including the one that I was just talking about with someone else who scored a lot better. And I'll say, "Do you have any questions about this section?" And they're like, "No, I pretty much understand everything."
Yeah.
And it's
That's,
like,
yeah, dude,
I highly doubt
100%.
that.
100%. Yep. My best students ask the best questions. My best students are aware of the things they don't understand, right? Because they're actually understanding
Hmm.
enough of the test to like be able to really see where they don't understand.
Yeah.
And it's the students who are scoring 150 who, it's weird how there's just some of them that are like cocky with their 150. And they think they've got it. They got it nailed down. They know everything.
Yeah.
Like, never ask me any questions. I'm like, really? You're not going to ask me any questions? Okay.
Yeah. And I think that would explain why so many people are obsessed with speed because they score, 150 and they say things like,
I understand it. I just can't finish it.
I just can't do it fast. And it's like, okay. Sometimes I don't do this as much anymore. I think I was a little more sassy before, but sometimes I'd say to people like, okay, well, go ahead and take all the time you want on that test and tell me what you get when you come back, you know?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, let's
And
be honest. I usually say, like, oh, so you got 100% of the questions that you attempted? You got them all right?
yeah,
And then they're like, well, no, I missed these three. I'm
but
like,
they're
oh.
easy. They're stupid mistakes. Well, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, get them right.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I don't want everybody should be cool with making mistakes, but if you have that mentality, you're missing something, and that's what you need. You're blind to that, and we need to help you like kind of wake up. You
Yeah.
know?
It's kind of like the reason why with private tutoring, I'm leaning toward, I don't know what you think about this, but I'm leaning toward having like a kind of a minimum LSAT score before I'll work with someone one on one,
Yeah.
because it's unsatisfying for me to work with the 150 student who thinks he knows everything. I'll have the 150 student who shows up for our tutoring appointments, and all they want to do is tell me all the things they understand.
Hmm.
And they're not happy with their scores, but they're perfectly happy with their understanding of the test. They got it all. They got their strategies, they got their plan, they know exactly what they want to do, but their score's not there. So they want
Hmm.
to do private tutoring, but then they don't admit that they don't understand stuff.
Yeah.
Um, or they want to argue with me and like try to tell me why B is actually a better answer than the credited answer D. At
Yeah.
least there we can have a conversation.
Yeah.
But when they just show up with like, "Oh yeah, I did these tests and no, I figured everything out. I don't have any questions. I'm fine." It's like, "Okay, then what are we doing?"
Yeah.
And it is true that when you're paying me to work with you on the LSAT, it's better if you're already scoring 165 or 170. The
Hmm.
people who are scoring 170, 172, those are the people who can actually, I think, benefit the most from working with me,
Yeah.
because then we can talk about the places where It's clear that you've got a really good solid handle on everything, but there's these few issues, and we can dig into those few issues, and you're in a position where you can actually learn.
Hmm.
A lot of times when I have the 150 private tutoring students, I don't know, I think they'd be better off in a class or with books or the online class, or I don't know, almost anything besides just working with me one on one.
Yeah. No, that's all. That's how the conversation usually goes when I'm talking to someone who is asking what they should do. Like, should I do a class? Should I do tutoring? And it's like, well, where are you scoring? If they haven't scored anything yet, like maybe go take a test on Saturday and let me know what you got. Because if you're scoring, like you said, in the 150s, 140s, then we're going to spend a ton of hours, expensive hours, talking about things that you will learn about in class. And everything you need to hear in class, or everything you hear in class, is things that you need to hear and learn.
Yeah, and I suppose if you've tried a class and it didn't work or something, like if you really feel like you did the work
Hmm.
and it just didn't click for you, I mean, I sure, there's some people who are just one-on-one learners, I suppose.
Well, one on one is still better than class. I think that's even if you're in the 140s because you're working individually with someone at your pace exactly with whatever you're struggling with. But is it a good use of time and money? I don't know. I mean, I guess that's kind of a thing.
If you have unlimited money, I mean,
Yeah.
I like money, but I end up talking people out of it so often. I mean, I just end up all the time saying, "Hey, I think you'd be so much better off in a class. You have the same issues as everybody else in the class. We're going to talk about all of these same things. We're going to talk about those in the class,
Yeah.
or read these books."
Cool. So, this person did have enough, or does have a question about timing. I think he said he was scoring in the one or average around 170, right?
Okay.
And his highest score was a 173, if I remember correctly. It's not here now, but one of his concerns is finishing the test on time. And he says that when I finish the test in a comfortable time, I tend to do so with high accuracy and confidence. But there are other times when he doesn't finish, and he thinks it's when he spent too much time on the earlier questions and then had to kind of rush on the later questions. And so, in order to make sure that he has enough time to answer these last questions carefully, he wants to know, quote, should I focus on speed in the early to middle part of the test and up with an approximate loose overall timing plan like suggested in Manhattan LSAT and others, or continue to focus on accuracy and familiarity so that those earlier questions go faster. He knows that focusing on timing can be problematic, but I'm wondering if I'm not working fast enough by trying not to make a big deal out of it. It's one of the last consistent obstacles that I've had, blah, blah, blah. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you know what I'm going to say. I I don't feel like you should ever be trying to go quickly through the earlier questions. I feel like you should be so good at those earlier questions that you naturally go quickly through them. I feel like they should feel easy to you because you're going slowly and carefully, and they just seem easy, and the correct answers are jumping off the page and the wrong answers look really, really wrong. You know exactly what you're looking for. You find it, you pick it, you move on. And it's not because you're trying to do I've heard people say, like, well, I'm just going to do the first 15 questions in 15 minutes so that I can then have time to do the later ones. I don't, that just seems stupid to me.
Yeah, I don't think that we necessarily disagree, but I do find that some people are overthinking easy questions and they're just not relaxing enough or something.
Well, like for example, maybe when people are trying to make a case for a wrong answer, like that's overthinking, right? Where it's like,
Hmm.
well, I found this other answer over here that looks really great, and I don't quite understand this one, but I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes and try to make it make sense.
Hmm.
That is what I would call overthinking. And being, in that case, yeah, listen, you knew what you were looking for, you found it, this is it, like this is the answer.
Hmm.
Why are you don't, I don't necessarily even understand the wrong answers every single time,
Hmm.
right? I'm happy to say, huh, that's looks like a big mess, probably not the
Hmm.
answer, move on.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think in his case, if he's scoring in the 170 to around the 170s, I suspect that if he's going too slow in the earlier ones, he's probably not being as confident in his answers.
Giving too much credit to the wrong answers, giving too much credit to the answer choices generally,
Yeah.
and not doing it on a higher plane that we're always looking for. When you're reading the question very thoroughly, you really have a good handle on the argument, you know what the question's asking for, you make a good prediction, then you should be able to go through and disrespect those answer choices pretty strongly, right? It should just
Hmm.
be like, well, no, 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 yes, no. That's how it should feel.
Yeah.
I mean, so I guess if I was going to go faster at all, I would certainly tell him to go faster in the answer choices.
Hmm.
But I worry as soon as people start saying, "Well, I have to do the first X questions in Y minutes," then I
Hmm.
start getting very concerned that the student is going to be rushing through the argument.
Hmm.
And if they do that, then they're just going to be screwed.
Yeah, I agree. So that's it for the questions we have from listeners. Do you want to jump into the June 2007 test?
Yeah, it's been a while since we've done some actual logical reasoning on the show. So let's get that. That's the June 2007 LSAT. If you want to play along at home, you can just Google it.
And yeah, we are in section 3, which is a logical reasoning section, and we are on question 5. Do you want to read this?
Okay, here we go. This is June 2007, Section 3, question number 5. And Atrens says, an early entomologist observed ants carrying particles to neighboring ant colonies and inferred that the ants were bringing food to their neighbors. Okay. That would be one explanation for why they're carrying these particles.
Yeah. By the way, I think you should be seeing this in your mind. If not, you're reading too fast. It should be, this is something that's super easy to picture. You have two colonies, ant colonies, and ants are carrying things from one to the other.
Yeah, and I feel like Atrens comes with the like very generous um, interpretation of what's going on here.
Very altruistic.
I did not know that insects were quite so generous to their neighbors.
Yeah, so it, yeah, this is, I mean, this is so interesting because I feel like most people don't even think about this. This person, this etymologist, is making an argument and drawing some sort of conclusion, and you should be reacting to it and thinking about why it could be reasonable. I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable, but I also think there are plenty of other conclusions that could be drawn here, and there's a lot of things that we don't know.
Yeah.
Like are these neighboring colonies their neighbors, or are they actually all part of the same colony? I don't know. I mean, who knows?
Well, it's a fact that this happened, right?
Hmm.
So I think it's a fact that the entomologist observed ants carrying particles from one colony to the neighboring colony.
Yeah,
I
that's
think that's
true.
a fact.
That's
But
fair.
then when it says and inferred that the ants were bringing food to their neighbors, it's a fact that it's a fact that the entomologist made that inference.
Yes.
But that inference doesn't have to be true. It's a
Hmm.
premise of the argument that the entomologist made that inference.
Yeah.
But just because the entomologist thinks that's what's going on doesn't mean that that's what has to be going on. And there are a million other possible explanations. Like, what if they're bringing their poop to the
Hmm.
neighboring colony and dumping it down the entrance of the colony?
It'd make for a good Pixar movie.
That seems much more like what insects would actually probably do.
Yeah.
I mean, I what? They're bringing food to their neighbors? Wow. Yeah, and I think it's right that we're already on the right track, right? Because we have recognized that this entomologist is making an inference that is not necessarily justified,
Yep.
thinking about possible alternate explanations. There's causation here, right? This is a it doesn't
Hmm.
say cause and effect, but the entomologist is saying, "Hey, the cause of you bringing these particles to neighboring ant colonies is that the reason why you're doing that is because you're bringing food to the neighbors."
Hmm.
And it's like, well, what about any of the other different causes? They could be bringing poison to their neighbors.
Hmm.
Okay. Further research, however, revealed that the ants were emptying their own colony's dumping site. Huh.
Well, you predicted that one.
Well, yeah, I didn't mean, yeah.
Is there a vague memory of this in the past, maybe?
No, but I mean, I would when I read dumping site, I'm actually not thinking about poop,
Well, who knows what that is, but it is waste, right? They are
dead
taking
bodies or garbage or
dead bodies.
yeah, dead bodies, dude. That's what I mean. Ants carry around the other dead ants all the time.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
Okay,
Okay,
so there. This is the further research says, nah, they were emptying their own colony's dumping site.
sure. Hmm.
And we both read that and go like, oh yeah, well that seems pretty sensible.
Hmm.
Thus, so here comes the conclusion of the argument. Thus, the early entomologist was wrong. And at that point, I don't know about you, Ben, but I would have to switch teams again.
Have to switch teams. Yeah, you have to say, okay, we thought that the entomologist was an idiot, but now we have to think that you're an idiot because it's not like the entomologist was definitively wrong, maybe just not entirely correct.
Yeah, we have to push back whenever we can, and especially we have to push back on the conclusions of these arguments.
Hey, so quick pause here for a second. Would you say that the official, uh, not that we shouldn't talk about religion, but I don't know, the official religious position of any true LSAT test taker should be agnosticism?
Um, sure, yeah, I think so. Yes.
I'm not trying to be controversial here, but basically, like that is the underlying tenet, right? Unless it's proven, we're just gonna be the devil's advocate and say, well, okay, so you were going on this side, you were going in this one direction, and you didn't quite prove it, so we're gonna say you're an idiot. And then the other person takes the opposite position, and we say, whoa, you're an idiot because you didn't prove your position. So unless a position is proven, we're always going to be unsatisfied and we're going to say you just don't know.
If we want to talk about the religion thing, I mean, I'm an atheist, and I used to say agnostic until I read some Richard Dawkins made a pretty good case about why atheists, if you really believe, or if you think that God is not the most reasonable hypothesis, that you really probably shouldn't call yourself an agnostic, and instead you should actually just say, "Hey, I'm an atheist because I'm
Is
allowed
he
to."
making that from a probability standpoint?
I don't remember. It was in the God Delusion. I have that book around here somewhere. The God Delusion. I really liked it, but it was just it was. I'm not shy at all about just going ahead and saying I'm an atheist, and I do actually say it in class fairly frequently. That the reason why I'm good at the logical reasoning is that I'm an atheist. That or you could talk about the chicken and the egg there, but yes, I am open to evidence. I'm a reality based, rational person, and I'm not going to just buy anyone's bullshit or dogma. And the to get off the religion thing, I like to think about being mercenary. How about that? Right? Think about
Okay, yeah.
think about a lawyer. You're the best lawyer in town, and some shit just went down. You aren't anyone's attorney yet, so you get to decide who you want to work for, and you should be able to read both sides of the argument, see both sides, make the case both ways, and pick who you want to work for.
Yeah.
And so I do absolutely think about that. On a question like this, I was totally calling bullshit on this entomologist. But when the conclusion then says, therefore, the entomologist was wrong, I would think, wait a minute now, what if that entomologist wants to pay me? You know, the entomologist deserves to have a defense. So how would you make that defense, Ben?
Oh, well, I would say that let's look at the premise again really quick. It says further research revealed that the ants were emptying their own colony's dumping site, and maybe the dumping site has food, or maybe they were emptying their dumping site in this particular case, but in other cases they do bring food. So,
Yeah, what is a dumping site, right? I mean, is
yeah.
that defined? Dumping what? You could read that a lot of different ways. I mean, it could be poop, but it also could be food, or it could be excess food, food scraps,
Mhm.
right? What if
Mhm.
these ants, they were out to like their fancy dinner and they
Mhm.
took home their doggy bags and they put it all in the dumping site. And then someone said, "Hey guys, we're never going to eat this stuff. Let's go see if we can give it. Let's go give it to our poor neighbors next door." And they all feel really good about themselves for bringing their leftovers over to the other colony.
Yeah.
In that case, this early entomologist can actually be proven true, proven correct without changing any of these facts.
We just don't know at this point. I mean, their entomologists could certainly be wrong.
Yeah, that would be the case. That would be the case we would like to make, though, right? I mean, that would be awesome.
Wait,
If
what would be awesome?
if
Make what
you're the
case?
entomologist,
Hmm.
and if we can prove that the ants were taking food from their dumping site,
Oh yeah. Or the dumping site includes only food.
the dumping site is food.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the dumping site is food, then the entomologist wins on these facts.
Hmm.
So that's the ideal case if you're going to defend the entomologist. And I think it's worth thinking about that.
I guess my point, getting back to agnosticism, is that unless you are compelled by the evidence to take a side, your issue should be, well, wait, maybe not.
Absolutely.
We don't know.
Absolutely. I think you should almost never be nodding along, especially when you get to the conclusion. You should never be like, "Oh yeah, this entomologist is definitely wrong." Because
Yeah.
if you bought it here, then you don't know what's wrong with the argument. You're just like, "Oh, well, they were emptying their own dumping site, so of course it can't be food then." Yeah, so the entomologist was wrong.
Yeah.
And then you have just made the assumption of the argument
Yeah.
without realizing it.
Then you know what you're looking for. And when it says Atrin's conclusion follows logically if which one of the following is assumed, you're thinking you should at that point think, oh, apparently this argument is making some sort of an assumption, but I didn't realize that because I bought the conclusion. You need to go out and figure out. You need to go back and figure out what
Yeah,
is.
that's an absolute. If that happens to you, because yeah, when you see that question stem, that's a sufficient assumption question. And a sufficient assumption question doesn't make any sense unless there was some missing piece in the argument. It can't be that the argument is already proven. There
Yeah.
has to be something that was missing. And so I would definitely just go back up to the argument and figure it out
Yeah.
rather than just go get beat up by the answer choices. And that's where I worry if people are trying to push it on the speed. Oh, I don't have time to go back and reread the argument. I got to get through these. This is the first five. I got to get this
Hmm.
question five. It can't be hard. I got to go. I got to go through. And so
Hmm.
then they start reading the answer choices, and then they spend forever getting just battered back and forth by the answer choices.
Hmm.
Yeah. So if you go back, maybe if you didn't spot the flaw or you didn't spot the missing piece, maybe now you get a second chance to go back. And then what's the missing piece here, Ben? Or what would you be thinking here on a sufficient assumption question?
Well, so sufficient assumption. We're trying to prove that the early etymologist was wrong. We need to show that there's no way they could have been bringing food to their neighbors. So maybe something like the dumping site never has food, or ants who empty their own colonies' dumping sites are incapable of carrying food. I mean, it doesn't really matter as long as it prevents these ants from bringing food to their neighbors.
Yeah, and I think the perfect answer would be ant dumping sites never contain food, right?
There you go. It's most reasonable, but it's anything that would basically prevent them from doing
It
that.
could be much bigger than that, right? It could be like
Ants never carry food.
ants never carry food. Yeah. No dumping site ever contains food. Not just with regard to
Yeah.
ants, but no dumping site
In the
ever.
world,
Right.
human or animal or
Right. Food
alien.
has never been dumped in the history of the world or something like that.
Food doesn't exist.
Yeah, that would work. Sure.
Yep. Yeah, that's the thing about sufficient assumptions that people need to get their minds wrapped around on. I think because the word sufficient sounds like just enough. Like when I say, "Oh, there was sufficient food," I think people interpret it as like there was just enough food
No,
at
no. There could be
Thanksgiving.
more than enough. Right. Like
Yes.
Thanksgiving.
Yep. So it's enough or more than enough. And so if you ever say to yourself, "This answer just seemed too extreme or too strong," that's good for necessary assumption. It's really bad for sufficient assumption. That's not the
Yeah.
reason to get rid of something.
Necessary is like one scrap of bread, at least one scrap of some sort of sustenance once a year.
Hmm.
That's necessary, or else you're dead, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sufficient is like Thanksgiving dinner 10 times every single day.
Hmm.
That would be more than sufficient. But sufficient can be more than. It's totally fine to have a big, huge answer choice for sufficient.
Yeah. Because if it is more than sufficient, it actually is sufficient. You've satisfied whatever
Yeah.
you needed, plus more.
Making this prediction, I mean, the correct answer is like, I can see it. It's like glowing on the page.
Oh, have you? I haven't even looked down yet.
Yeah. I like glance, just like looked right at it.
Okay. Well, let's go through these, and some of these I can tell are already going to be entertaining.
Sure. So A says ant societies do not interact in all the same ways that human societies interact.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, it maybe it's necessary because it's not a huge stretch to say human societies bring food to their neighbors. I mean, that's like a obvious fact.
Yeah. And so they can't interact. If you're going to say that they didn't bring food to their neighbors and they can't interact in all the same ways, but it's not like humans do it all the time. And this conclusion is
Yeah.
just about this instance.
Yeah. Anyway, A might be close to necessary, but it's certainly not sufficient because it just
Wait, let's
doesn't.
let's let's hang out with A and
Okay.
think about it and try to make it correct and just spend a lot of time here. I think that'd be a good use of time.
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, and that's exactly what I think people do when if you're overthinking A, yeah, that's no. I mean, it's a sufficient assumption question.
Yep.
We have a very good prediction. I want an answer that says the dumping site doesn't contain food,
Yeah.
and A doesn't come close to saying that. So how is A the right answer for this sufficient assumption question? Sufficient assumption questions are super, super predictable. So you should know the answer going in, and then A should just be like an easy, nah, come on,
No.
next. Okay, B says, there is only weak evidence for the view that ants have the capacity to make use of objects as gifts.
Okay. So maybe this etnomologist was right. I mean, weak evidence is still evidence. This is not doing anything good for us.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it's yeah, you're right. So I guess it could be a bad strengthener or it could be a bad weakener, but it's
Yeah.
certainly not the perfect answer, which is sufficient assumption questions. They require the perfect answer, and you should know what the perfect answer is.
Yeah.
And B's just not doing it. C says ant dumping sites do not contain particles that could be used as food.
Boom.
Yeah, it's like too easy.
Yeah.
If that's true, then the conclusion of the argument is proven that the early entomologist was, in fact, wrong.
Yeah.
D. The ants to whom the particles were brought never carried the particles into their own colonies.
Oh my gosh. We don't care about those freaking ants.
Yeah, I mean, the case for D is like, well, if it was food, they would have brought it into their own colony. So, but I mean, It's no. Maybe it's a very weak strengthener. E, the entomologist cited retracted his conclusion when it was determined that the particles the ants carried came from their dumping site.
Okay, well, why doesn't that prove that the entomologist was wrong?
Well, why does it prove that the entomologist was wrong? Like just because he took it back, but he could have still been right in the first place.
Yeah, he could be fearful of his conclusion, but his conclusion was ultimately correct.
Yeah.
I think this actually happened to Einstein, right? He added a constant to his equation and then regretted it. And he added it in part because of the pressure that this must not be an accurate reflection of reality, his theory of relativity.
What, it was like E equals mc squared plus 2?
No, the formulas themselves are actually a lot more complicated in terms of relativity and how they predict things about the universe. I wish I understood them. But when he came up with it, everyone was like, "Wait a sec, your formula does not account for the amount of energy that's in the universe, and so, or at least the amount of energy that we think should be there." And he was like, "Yeah, you're right. Okay, so I need to tweak my formula by adding a constant, basically just saying everything I just said plus 3 billion trillion whatever
Right.
tons of matter. I don't even understand it at all. If someone could
But if
email
he
us and
only
explain
did
it.
that, if he, no, please don't email us that. Or email
Oh, I'm
Ben and
actually
explain.
curious. You can email to me, ben@strategyprep.com. But in any case, he added this constant, and then it's like, okay, now his formula conforms with what everyone thought the universe should be, and then later they're like, oh, wait a sec, that matter isn't there. The theory was initially correct, and he said it was the biggest mistake of his career to add that constant. So you can back away from your conclusion, but your conclusion was still right.
Gotcha. Yeah, right. I'm sure that, like, when what was it, Galileo or whatever is basically being burned at the stake for saying that the Earth goes around the
I'm
sun.
so glad I was born in
Yeah, no shit.
1998 for anyone who's curious and now living in 2016. My goodness.
Yeah, if he could have been, retracting his. Oh, never mind. I didn't mean it. You're right, guys. The Earth totally doesn't. You're right. The sun goes around the Earth. And he's doing that to save his life. But that doesn't mean he was wrong just because he retracted his statement,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I could say that religious people are delusional, and
Hey,
then I could
you're gonna
take it
start losing
back
listeners, Nathan.
because I don't want to lose listeners. So I could take it back and I could say, oh, yeah, never mind. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't right in the first place.
Yeah. Oh, on that note,
You can always email us questions. Help at thinkinglsat.com comes to both of us. If you look at thinkinglsat.com, you'll see our editor, Andy Black's awesome show notes. Those are always kind of entertaining to read. You can tweet us at thinkinglsat. You can tweet me at nfox. Thanks for listening. Please tell a friend. Give us a 5-star rating, maybe a review on iTunes. That really helps. People wouldn't find the show if it wasn't for you rating and reviewing and spreading the word. So thank you for doing that. Anything else we
yeah.
need to add, Ben?
I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who volunteered to help review videos. A ton of people actually responded. I need to thank them all directly, but at least indirectly through the show. Thank you. It's been super helpful. So I don't know if I said this, but there's like 3,500 or something now videos in my crazy YouTube account, and trying to sort through them all is a little overwhelming, but we're making progress. So
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah. And just thanks everybody for generally listening. This is a very gratifying project we've got going here, and it's awesome to hear from listeners. So keep the emails coming.
yeah, thanks.